What is up, and welcome back to the Unfiltered Trainer podcast, the podcast where we ditch the fluff, call out the BS, and talk real life transformation in your body, mind, and soul. I'm your host, Gina, and today we are talking about something so many of us get trapped in, this feeling of being quote unquote stuck. You're sitting there thinking, once I have more clarity, I'll move. Once I have a plan, I'll act. Once I feel ready, I'll begin. But the truth is, clarity doesn't come first, action does. And then clarity shows up somewhere along the way. So today I'm breaking down exactly how to stop overthinking, how to start trusting your gut, and take messy but powerful steps forward no matter where you're starting from. So let's get into it. I call this the lie of quote unquote readiness. Let's just get honest. How many of you are waiting or have waited to start something because you felt like you weren't ready? I used to say this all of the time. I'll launch my brand when I have the right logo and color scheme. I'll post content when I have the perfect plan and I've curated the best videos. I'll embrace my coaching journey when I have everything figured out and I feel confident in my own skin. And the realization is that that perfect moment never came, because it truly doesn't exist. And at the height of when all of this started, literally almost 13 years ago, when my whole online brand accidentally turned into what you see today, I was at the worst phase of my life, and it was messy and it was dark. And a couple years in, when things really started to go well and I was gaining traction, my entire life came to a halt. And it really taught me that the truth is readiness, it's a lie. And we tell ourselves it to avoid fear. The fear of judgment, the fear of failure, the fear of never being good enough or feeling qualified enough. But what I've learned and what I want to pass along to you is that movement creates momentum. Confidence comes from doing, not by overthinking. You won't figure it all out and then start. You'll start, and as you figure it out, it happens along the way. So something I want you to take action in before we really get into this episode is I want you to have that one intention, that one thing that you've been waiting to be ready to do. What is something that sits on your heart, your mind, your soul that you know you want to pursue but you haven't yet? I want you to take that and break it into the smallest first step. And I want you to take action on it today, this week, right now. I'm so tired of being the person that used to say, oh, I'll do this when, I'll do this then. And then time comes and goes and you're left feeling disappointed. And that got old. And I'm sure you're feeling the same way, that you're watching other people pursue their goals and dreams and wondering, why can't you too? So I want you to sit with your thoughts this week and ask yourself how it felt when you took that one small actionable step, even though everything's not perfect, even though you don't have all of the answers, and just tap into how soul deep and driven that little action was. Take that and run with it. And speaking of movement, the kind of movement that led to all the things you've seen me accomplish today was not polished, it was not perfect, it was not clean, it was not well versed. This is not something I went to school for or knew how to pursue. It was messy, it was unpolished, it was totally imperfect, and honestly, ever evolving, because messy action is still aligned action. So let me take it back to when I launched Gina Marie Fit. I didn't have a website. I didn't have branding. I didn't even have like a clear call to offer. I literally named my page Gina Marie Fit because I was in the process of losing 30 pounds. I was depressed beyond get out. I was heartbroken and trying to figure out what to do with my life and how I became this sad version of myself. And as I started to work on myself and honestly the gray started to clear away, I started to find myself again. And I realized that the strong, empowered, always opinionated, always honest version had faded away because I allowed myself and my identity to be tied to other people, places, and things. And so when all of that was gone, I was what felt like a shell of a human being. But I knew that I had a mission. I knew I was passionate, and I knew that was something that was going to have to be enough to begin. And so I was posting very messy content. I was showing up raw and real and authentic. I was connecting with people even when I didn't feel like I had it all together. I was what you see today, unfiltered. I just didn't have a title for it. I got tired of seeing perfectly curated feeds that all had the same templates and making sure that the color schemes were perfect and everybody looked like they had a six-pack and they were all meal prepping and planning, and it just seemed like their results happened overnight, and I was the complete opposite side of that. And because of that, I moved and I learned and I grew and I learned what resonated with people. I learned what I enjoyed. I learned what worked and what didn't. And people resonated with me because they could see themselves in me. I was messy. I was honest. I was very, I lacked, honestly, for lack of a better word, I lacked polish. I was just posting what resonated with me. And I thought to myself that if I felt this way, there's got to be somebody else out there that needs to hear this. And so action bred insight. It is so easy to sit in a journal and try to think your way into clarity. But the truth is, you don't think your way into purpose. You walk into it. And for some of us, there is something we are born with that ultimately our life will eventually lead us to. And when we wholeheartedly pursue that purpose, life starts to make sense, which is what I've been experiencing these last couple of months. And so even if the first few steps are shaky and you may not feel as aligned, I promise you, when you continue to put one foot in front of the other, amazing things will eventually happen as you walk down this path. So I want you to take these action steps. First things first, I want you to post something messy but meaningful this week. No filter, no polish. I want you to put yourself out there. And I want you, when you do this, because it's not an if, it's a when, to tag me so I can support you as you're putting yourself out there. And then the second thing I want you to do is to choose one goal and list 3 ways you can experiment with action. And after this, I want you to reflect after each step and to note what worked or what sparked joy. When you start to pursue life and when you're pursuing what is truly in alignment with you and your purpose-driven mission, you will notice that you carry yourself in a different manner. And the thing is, even when you start to take action, there still remains a trap that a lot of us fall into. And that, sadly, is waiting for somebody else to validate what we're doing. And so I gave you guys the episode Validation Detox that was leading up to this episode because it's super important that we understand that trusting your gut versus seeking permission is something that you have to establish in order to persevere after your most purpose-driven goals and dreams, because along the way, you will be faced with people who do not believe in you, who will question your actions, your mission, your purpose. And one of the biggest blocks I've seen and experienced myself is that people oftentimes wait for somebody else to say that we're allowed to do something, or that they believe in us, or they know that we're capable. Wholeheartedly, please listen to this. You do not need permission to change your life. You don't need your partner's full approval. You don't need your coworker to understand. You don't need your mom to co-sign on your dreams. You don't need your best friend to back you up. You need to trust yourself. And the best way to build self-trust is to keep small promises to yourself. Start the thing. Start the action, the business, the website, the content, whatever it is. Maybe you want to get a degree or you want to get a new certification. Start and keep showing up for it. Stay consistent for you, not for applause, because I can tell you when you achieve goals and dreams in your life, sometimes it is really lonely. Every time you take action, you're going to remind and tell your brain that, hey, we're doing this. We're in this together. And that repetition will enable you to build trust. That trust is what's going to enable you to improve your confidence. And that confidence is going to be what becomes the thing that leads to momentum. And that momentum over time, because consistency is king, is what will yield your success and you're living your most purpose-driven life. And so in this part of the podcast, I want you to identify one decision you're delaying because you're seeking validation. From that, I want you to write out your own permission slip and I want you to act on it. And by permission slip, remember when you think about when we were kids and when you would go on a trip and you would have to be given permission to do it? That still exists as an adult. I want you to give yourself permission to act on your goals, dreams, and desires. And then I want you to choose one small promise that you can keep to yourself for the next 7 days. And I'm going to be very honest with something I'm working on. So I want to create a series on YouTube because my podcast is linked to YouTube. And I obviously am called the Unfiltered Trainer because I have always had a very honest, open, sometimes might say bold approach to dealing with life. And I think it just comes from the world I grew up in and the things I've been through and the fact that I grew up a long time ago. And so I really want to start a series that is open and honest and vulnerable. And I have the entire plan laid out, but I haven't clicked film because I got scared. And I got scared that what if I get judged for sharing my truth? And then I was at an empowerment women's brunch and they were having a keynote speaker. And that keynote speaker, I swear to God, it was like she was telling my life story to this crowd. And as she was so boldly sharing her truth and her extensive story with grief and mental health and loss and just how lonely it can be when you are wholeheartedly pursuing your goals and dreams, it resonated so much with me. And in that moment, I, for the first time in a couple months since I started feeling sick again and dealing with all these health issues, felt inspired. I don't believe in motivation, but I do believe in inspired and aligned action. And so in that moment, I was taking notes because I love handwritten notes, and I committed to doing this project. And so if you're on YouTube and you look up Gina Marie Fit, it used to be just a bunch of workout videos. I used it as a platform to create videos for clients because I have a course that goes along with my workbooks and my workout guides. And when I did online coaching one-on-one, I had this really cool course, and it's all a bunch of unlisted videos because it's just for clients. But I really started to re-dabble into YouTube. I've been making these short, simple videos, trying to just learn how to edit and all of the fun things in preparation to be more consistent. And so my one small promise to myself is I'm going to make those videos and I'm going to stick to the simple content plan I set out for myself this week. And so just know, as I am so boldly and honestly sharing these topics every single week and giving you action steps, I'm doing the work right alongside you because I too very much am in the thick of my own personal transformation. So as we transition into this next phase of the podcast, I want you and myself to take a little journey, kind of hold your hand here, because there's a mindset trap that really slows people down. And if you know anything about me, it is the biggest, I want to call it a disease that I suffer from. It is the thing that's enabled me to be and get to where I am today, but it's also been the biggest hindrance for me, and that's perfectionism. If you know me, you know done is better than perfect, and I know that, But if there is an expectation, I am that person that wants to exceed expectations all day, every day, and everything that I do. And so if this hits home with you and you struggle with perfectionism, stay with me because we're going to dive into it. This I call as the mindset that kills momentum. And that mindset that used to kill my momentum is my obsession with perfectionism. If you listen to last week's podcast, I talked about fitness addiction. And in my 20s, I lived a very different life. I was in a relationship. We had a home. There was a direction and a plan for my life. I never saw myself doing anything other than being a healthcare worker and a personal trainer. And in that time frame of my life, everybody thought that my life was perfect and I had it all together, and that I at the time was a traveling therapist and I was going all these places and doing all these things and getting to take these trips. And my life at the time to the external world seemed incredible. And I too thought I had it all. And obviously, if you know me now, you know none of those realities are real. And my life and all of that fell apart. And I now know that because of that and my need to be perfect, the series of events and things that I did and experienced led to a lot of the issues that I have worked through. And I was striving to be what I thought would be perfect. And if I could be perfect, then I could get everything I lost back. And so I went all in on my health and fitness, and I use that very loosely because what I was doing was not safe. I was over exercising, under eating, punishing myself by doing more cardio. If I ate badly, I was avoiding social situations. I was making sure that I wasn't caught dead in a bathing suit. Like, there were so many insecurities that were driving the entire course of my life. And I thought that, okay, if I could get a better job, if I could be financially secure, if I could be in the best shape of my life, this, like the laundry list was exhausting, but perfectionism is how I thought I could heal. And I thought if it wasn't right, it wasn't worth doing. And that mindset, it kept me stuck. It kept me depressed. It kept me in fear because I knew in my heart and in my head, my storytelling abilities and the way I was boldly sharing my truths before people were ready for them was a gift. And it was a gift that was scary to pursue because perfectionism disguises itself as high standards. But really, it was just the fact that I was terrified of being judged. And it's something that I have never been judged more in my life, I have realized, than when I've lived in Tampa. And something I am actively and privately behind the scenes working on is letting it go. Because I know in my heart, done is better than perfect. And imperfect progress beats perfect intentions all day, every day. We are allowed to evolve. We are also allowed to pivot. And you're allowed to look back and cringe, because I cringe at myself. When I think about who I was in that phase of my life and the things I was doing to try to get somebody's attention or approval is appalling. Like, Gina now is like looks at that version of herself and she was weak. She was insecure. She was incessantly needing people's validation and approval. And now I can look back, and even though I at the time, can think it was cringeworthy, I also know that that's what's called growth. Because if you're not embarrassed by your first launch, your first post, your first business name, you're probably the one that's waiting too long to begin anyways. But what's incredibly beautiful about life, as cliche as that statement might sound, is when I look back on Gina 10, 12 years ago and Gina now, as I'm sitting here filming this podcast in this beautiful space that I have worked my ass off to create and establish, I'm so damn proud of those embarrassing phases of my life, because that is what the foundation upon what I built was and now has become. And so something that I want to inspire you to do and take action in is that I want you to share something that's unfinished, that reflects your growth. And then when you do that, I want you to say this out loud. Done is better than perfect. You might need to say this like 5 times fast, but then act on it, because when you reflect on the lessons that we've discussed so far, and then you think about something you launched or tried before, it's really incredible when you put that first layer out there and you build on it and you see what can become. This podcast is a great example of that. I was struggling, one, to like, how do you name a podcast? 2, my branding. I have the same branding. Everything's been the same for literally 10 plus years now. But how did I evolve to make it better? And if you scroll all the way to like the beginning of the Instagram of the Unfiltered Trainer page to now, like, we are consistently putting branding out there. We are making it work and we're learning along the way. And it's powerful because when you let go of perfection, you create space for something even more powerful. And that, my friends, is what we call confidence. Not the fake performative kind, the real kind that you can build, embrace, and wholeheartedly believe in. So that's how I want to end this episode, is establishing that confidence comes through doing. If you take one thing from this episode, I want it to be this. Confidence is not something you are born with. It's something you build, brick by brick. If you know anything about me, I have been constantly throughout every phase of my life insecure and terrified that my story and being different and sharing the circumstances and situations I have been through would always keep me as an insecure person that was not seen as worthy. And something that I've learned is that through showing up when it's awkward, through trying again after you have quote unquote failed, through continuing even when the results aren't immediate, that is how you build confidence, because it's a muscle. And right now we are going to train on it. And so how you're going to do that, and myself included, is that I want you to choose one thing you've avoided because you felt unqualified, and I want you to try it. I'm doing it right now. You're listening to my podcast. I wanted to start a podcast. I don't know. I think it's been 4, maybe 5 years ago now, maybe even longer. But when I started getting into podcasts, and then I found the Call Her Daddy podcast, and listening to Alex Cooper so boldly, confidently talk about stigmatized topics, it ignited this little light bulb in me, is that there are people, and especially, those who have a story, there's a purpose in that story, and that when you tap into that potential, even though you don't feel qualified to do it, once you start that journey and you truly evolve and you grow over time, you become confident in the thing you didn't think you were qualified to do because you put in effort and action. And so I want you to think about that one thing that you've been avoiding doing, and I want you to wholeheartedly go after it and take the first step to make it happen. Then I want you to create something that is called a confidence log. And this is very simple, and you might think it's cheesy, but reality, not everybody is clapping for you. Sometimes you have to clap for yourself. Is that I want you to track just a simple win per day. And I want you to write it on this confidence log, because as you track those wins, you're able to celebrate each action you take, even if it's small. And then when you're able to look back every week, every month, and something I'm doing is like an annual assessment and review of myself, is that you're going to see you're growing and you're evolving. And it really will be the most beautiful thing you reflect on, because you will realize that you were always more than worthy. You just had to believe in yourself. So if you're stuck right now, believe me, I get it. I've been there, but I promise you that clarity lives on the other side of action. So my friend, start before you're ready. Move before it makes sense. and show up as your most messy, authentic, unapologetic self. Because the world doesn't need a perfect version of you, it needs the realest one. You and me both know that you've got something powerful inside of you, and it's not going to unlock itself by sitting still or waiting for validation or feeling perfect. So let's go, let's move. And if this episode hit home for you, do me the biggest favor. Share it with a friend who's also overthinking so that they know they're not alone. And as you take these actionable steps, tag me, Gina Marie Fit, and tag the Unfiltered Trainer, and let us know what your first messy action will be. Until next time, y'all, keep showing up, keep growing, and keep it unfiltered. I'll see you in the next episode.